Good afternoon, everyone. The appointed time has arrived. It is 3 o'clock on January the 30th, 2018. I will call this meeting to order, Mayor and Council, for the purpose of discussing the charter. And tab A is just that. And I think you all should have two copies that Mr. Mecklin sent us, one with the red line changes on it, and the other one with all the changes that are in the red line copy. Does everyone have those? Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I think we inadvertently did not conclude the last meeting that we had. We may need to do so before we call this.
I'll move to close it.
Hang on, wait a minute. Before David, is that necessary?
I'm not sure I wouldn't say that we didn't close out the last meeting. We didn't adjourn it.
We didn't adjourn it.
The comment was made at the end of the last meeting that since it wasn't in a meeting, we didn't have to adjourn it. But I mean,
Yeah, I don't think we need to make anything for
Okay. I just don't want to get in trouble.
Since we left to adjourn.
all right, back to tab A. Let's see.
I'll move to adopt the agenda as written.
Okay, do I hear a second? A motion and a second. Second made by Councilman Marchman. All in favor? That's right. Thank you. Okay. Tab A, review of charter. David, you want to start us off?
Since we met last Thursday, I did send you out a new draft, and I've received in a few comments from some of you that were very good, and I also went back and added in a few suggested changes on my own based on my review of it again. I can go through those, and then some of you may have some additional changes that you want to go back, but let me just go through the ones that I've received in from a couple of you and some ones that I've made. The first one is on page 6. I'm looking at the red line version right now. In section 2.11, qualifications for office, it was pointed out to me that despite my best intentions, we still had 2 councilmans left in there, and I'm going to go back and change those to be consistent and say council member. So that's one change. Then on page 10, I had a change suggested to me, which was to take out on section 2.27C. The suggestion was made to take out the last sentence of that section, and that's the sentence that says ordinances, resolution, or other council measures vetoed by the mayor may also be presented to the council for further action at a special meeting of the council called prior to the next regular meeting. It was pointed out that that might be redundant because there's already, trying to find it here, but there's already another section to say that it would come back before the council at the next meeting.
The first sentence.
Yeah, the first sentence says ordinances vetoed by the mayor shall be presented by the clerk to the council at its next meeting, which would include a regular or a special meeting. All right, so that change, I will take out that last sentence. On that same section, section 2.27, and this is a question that I throw out to you, as there had been some concerns expressed about the veto being used for every single action that the council could take. And I did see another charter from another city that did have addressed that in some way, in that it said that except for council approval of appointments to committees, boards, and commissions. B, the employment of any position listed in this charter. C, ceremonial resolutions or proclamations. D, contracts or purchases for less than X number of dollars. Or E, matters which must be approved by the voters. The mayor may veto any action adopted by the city council. And that was an attempt just to try and carve out a few things that the mayor could not veto. For example, if one of the council members wanted to appoint person X to the Planning and Zoning Commission, that would say that you don't have the right to veto that appointment. So that's a thought that you can consider. Right now, the way it's written, the mayor can veto absolutely everything. But if that's a concern of the council, then there's at least a way that you might be able to restrict that a little bit. Okay, on page 11, section 3.11, up at the top, I've had several people express concern to me about the language of that. And the concern has been where it says the city council or its members shall not deal with city officers and employees. And there was a lot of concern about, well, what does deal with mean? You know, if I call up the road superintendent and ask them a question, does that constitute dealing with them? So I'm proposing that we perhaps change that to say that the city council or its members shall not attempt to supervise city officers and employees instead of deal with. That maybe more concisely expresses the view that, you know, if you are going to call somebody up and ask them a question, you're not violating the charter. But if you call them up and tell them, I don't want you working on that road, go work on this road, that's impermissible. Section 3.12E on that same page, which currently says any member of a board, commission, or authority may be removed from office by a vote of the majority of the members of the city council. I propose to add in a sentence to that which says no member of a board, commission, or authority shall have a property interest in their position. And the reason for including that in there is to make it clear on the face of it that if you get appointed to be on the planning or zoning board or on the library board or any other authority that we have, you don't have a property interest right to remain on that board, that you can be removed at will by the council.
When you say property interest,
Yeah, there is a theory that, you know, if you are serving in a government office, you have a property interest in that office and that you can't be removed from it without going through a number of steps of due process. You can't be removed from your position as a city council person without having to go through, you know, as it is here, some type of a hearing or a recall. You can't just wake up one morning and be removed because you have a property interest in your position. The purpose of this is to try and convey that if you're put on the Planning and Zoning Commission, you're not entitled to stay on there forever and ever until your term is up. You can be removed from it. You don't have any right to, or expectation that you will not be removed. And I think by letting people know that, I mean, it's a two-edged sword. You may be running some people off who might want to serve but don't want to be at risk of being removed. But you are also preserving your ability to remove somebody from an authority if you choose to.
When I heard that, my first thought was, some of the boards that we have a requirement that you either live in the city or own a business in the city, and that the property part of it entered into that thought.
Now, a property interest in this context is different from owning real property.
Okay.
It's a property interest in actually holding the office.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, page 15, section 4.13, the jurisdiction and powers of the municipal court. In subsection B, I would like to add, based on conversations that Tom and Chief Mansour and I have had, to add in where it says the municipal court shall have the authority to establish a schedule of fees, and I want to add in including an information technology fee, right there after fees. Because a number of courts, municipal courts in the state, have established what's called an information technology fee, so that you tack on some sum of money, around $10 usually, but could be more or less, to every ticket that gets paid for the purpose of funding the additional technology required in the municipal courts to keep up with all of the citations and the processing.
David, was that 4.13, did you say D?
B is in boy, where it says the municipal court shall have authority to establish a schedule of fees, including an information technology fee.
Okay.
So it's just inserting those 5 words. Because you can establish that information technology fee either through some local legislation or by a home rule amendment. There's some question as to whether or not a home rule amendment is the proper way to do that. Since we are submitting this entire charter for approval by the legislature, I thought it would be good to simply insert that language here. Okay, next page, page 16, section 510F. It did read, persons newly elected as mayor or council member at any general municipal election shall take office on January 1 following the election. Proposed to change that to say persons newly elected as mayor or council member at any general municipal election shall take office on January 1 following the election after having received their oath of office. So that, if you don't take your oath of office until the first meeting, which might be on the 4th, 5th, 6th or so, then you're not really in office till you've taken your oath of office. It is possible to actually come in, however, and be sworn in prior to January the 1st, so that you would be in office immediately on January the 1st.
After December 31st,
No,
not after 31st, after,
it's not uncommon after the election,
yeah.
and after the election has been certified, it's not uncommon for people to be given their oaths mid-December.
Effective January 1st.
Effective January the 1st, yes. On next page, page 17, section 5.21 on special elections and vacancies. Somebody raised the issue that, because there's a provision in there that says if a vacancy occurs within 12 months of the expiration of a term, that position could be filled by the remaining council members. Somebody pointed out or stated that 12 months was too long, that it should be reduced down to 6 months. So I want to raise that issue. Looking at it practically, the end of a term is December 31st of a year. Since last year was an election year, let's say the end of the term was December 31st, 2017. If you leave it like it is for 12 months, that would mean that anybody that resigned, or if a vacancy occurred from January the 1st of last year on, you could fill that position without us having a special election, because you're going to have a general election in November anyway. If you say that you can only fill the position if somebody resigns within 6 months of the end of a term, that would say that any time, if you had somebody to resign in April of 2017, you would have had to have called for a special election, because that was more than 6 months away from the end of a term. So I would, again, unless some of you have really strong feelings about that, I'm just trying to avoid the cost of having a special election that would only last for just a couple of months. So that was my argument for leaving it at 12 months, but if y'all have a strong feeling about reducing that, that's your decision. Okay, next, page 18. I had several questions about what is an officer. And they're on subsection A in the beginning. I just struck out "or other appointed officers" altogether and just left it the mayor or council members shall be removed from office for any one or more of the causes provided in Title 45. Because I think the other officers that was referred to included the city clerk, the city attorney, the city accountant, and really we're all subject to just getting fired on the spot, so I don't really think there's anything necessary to put in a removal provision for non-elected officials. And in subsection B, it's going to say removal of the mayor or a council member pursuant to subsection A shall be accomplished. So that, again, just taking out any reference to other officers. And that was the changes that were suggested to me. I still do receive questions about whether or not we have any interest in creating term limits, and not made any affirmative or negative decision on that issue.
I'd like for us to at least discuss it, and then whether it's approved or not approved, just get an idea of where people at least stand on it.
David, let me ask you a question. We talked last week, you were going to come up with some 10 items or 11 or 12 or whatever the number was, and we were going to take it one by one and vote.
Okay.
And I don't see that.
No, I did not do that. I can go through it. I know the issues that are the ones that there are what I consider to be policy decisions to be made, and although I haven't written them out, I know where they are, and we can just flip from page to page and do that if you'd like to.
But before we do that, I'd like to question one of those items you went through just now.
Sure.
3.11, page 11, red line. The word that bothers me in that sentence, 3.11, is the word "shall," and it doesn't tell you what the consequences are if you do break this little part of the charter, I would like to change that word shall to should. You know, you're just kind of directing somebody as to what they should do. If they shall and you do it, what happens?
Well,
It's almost like it's threatening you not to do it, but you don't know what the consequences are if you break the code.
well, you know, it's always hard because all I can do is come up with potential examples. You never, because life comes at you in a lot of different ways. You never know, you know, what the circumstances are going to be where that would come into play. But
I could think of one in particular. If you happen to be looking into some accusation against your city manager, you'll have to talk to the employees without his knowledge. So you're going to break the charter that way. And that, I think the word shall, if that sentence is going to remain in there, it should be changed to should. It's kind of like a direction. That's what we should do, but not telling us if we do something drastic might happen.
Using the example that you just gave about investigating city manager or the city attorney or each other, I don't think that would be attempting to supervise
But you'd
the
go around
officers
them
and
to talk
employees.
to the employees, so.
Yeah, you know, just based on my being involved for 25 years, I know any attempt to keep y'all from talking to employees doesn't make any sense, and it's not going to work. You bump into them all the time, so you shouldn't have to feel that you can't talk to an employee.
And the city managers had different philosophies, because Tom is go see them. The ones before him didn't like for us to go see them. So it's changed since I've been on the council, back and forth.
As
I
far as
understand why you got it in there. We really shouldn't be micromanaging the city.
well, and the consequences. Again, let's assume that one of the council members is saying, I don't care what it says, I want the road in my district paved, and goes out there and tells the road superintendent, get over there and pave X street today, or you're in big trouble. That's a blatant violation of that. And some consequences should flow from that. And probably the first consequence would be the rest of the council calling their hand on it. But if their response is, well, too bad, I'm going to do it anyway, then that probably triggers that section that would make it a grounds for removal.
You know, and that's a blatant example.
Yep.
But this can occur in a much more subtle way.
Sure.
Constantly calling 3-4 times a week, once or twice a week, repeated. That gives the impression of supervising. That's exactly what's happening.
Directing.
And it is directing. But this, and I pointed this out before, the charter is going to make it possible for the public to bring about this removal from office. I'm for leaving it in there. I understand exactly what he's saying, but if you put, would you say should?
Yeah.
You may as well take the whole thing out, because who cares? Should? There's a lot of shoulds. I don't see people doing the shoulds.
I don't see I'm not doing the shell either, so we might end up.
I see them
agree
doing
with
the
shall.
shalls.
Other questions of David on his changes and recommendations?
That was the only one I had in particular.
Okay,
Quite agree with.
I do like the idea of mentioning those 10 or so items.
Okay.
And individually, we can look at those and change them or make changes or suggestions or move forward.
Okay. Why don't we just do it by going from page to page, and when I come to a page where I think one of those, issues that need a consensus on, we'll stop at that. There's nothing on page 1, nothing on page 2, nothing on page 3, nothing on page 4, nothing on page 5. Nothing on page 6, but let me stop on page 6 because I did have a question raised as to whether or not we could do anything to strengthen section 2.11 qualifications for office. And I mean that says what we want it to say, and the big issue is that you have to reside in the ward for which you're elected, and you have to be eligible for election. You have to reside in the ward. State law controls the determination of residency, so I don't know that we can add anything additionally into that section, that because we don't have the right to supersede state law with regard to residency.
Thank you. I figured that was probably the answer, that it would, if it needed to be tightened or clarified, it would probably be state law. Thank you for that.
Sure. Okay. Nothing else on page 6.
While we're going through this, if someone has something on one of those pages, they better speak up now, forever hold your peace.
Yeah, please. I'm trying to pick them out, but if I miss one, it's unintentional.
Doing good.
I don't think I see anything controversial on page 7. At the top of page 8, we're doing something a little bit different than is in most charters in the state. Very few. I haven't really seen any other cities that have these provisions in here for the appointment of an interim mayor. And it's only because of our circumstances from last year that we created. I mean, it saved us last year from a constitutional crisis. So I've left it in here, just in the possibility that it one day might happen again, that we lose both a mayor and a mayor pro tem at the same time. Really, that was a very unusual circumstance, and probably will never come into play again, but it doesn't hurt anything to leave it in.
While you're on page 8.
Yeah, page 8 on section 2.21, that might be the first item that I would mark as making some sort of decision about. On subsection B, on who can call a special meeting, right now it reads that the call can be the mayor and 2 council members, or upon the call of 3 council members for a special meeting. And a couple of people have questioned that as to whether it should be something different, so I'd like to know if y'all are happy with it the way it is, or if you want to change it.
It's fine by me.
I don't have any objection.
But the question will come if it's a special meeting and the mayor and 2 council members call it, they can't vote because there's not a quorum.
Well, if they don't show up, if you don't have a quorum at the meeting, yeah.
Right. Well, and that's right, but
They can call the meeting.
if you have three people to call a meeting, you still need to get one more person there to have a quorum. Because down just 2 paragraphs below, there is the quorum is the mayor and 3 council members, or the mayor pro tem and 3 council members.
Okay, on that
So
line.
I'm saying that you ought to
that's-
have 4 people there.
That's my question, is the one you just read. I think that's wrong. I think it ought to be the mayor and 3, or the mayor pro tem and 2, because the mayor pro tem is a voting member. That means you got 3 people, you got a quorum. So you don't have to have any other than those 3 to have a quorum. Mayor pro tem is a member of the council. He's a voting member of the council.
Correct.
So I think it ought to be the mayor and 3, or the mayor pro tem and 2.
Okay, well, therein lies a decision for you to decide if that's how you want it.
Well, we can decide that. I want to go back to B. I will object to that, because I think to call the meeting, you probably should have a quorum. to call it. Ever how we define that in 2.23, I do think you probably need a quorum to be able to call a meeting. Otherwise, it could be pointless and just waste taxpayer dollars.
Well, that's just to call the meeting, though. That's not the meeting itself, because the meeting will be at least a day later.
I know, but to Councilman McDougal's point, you could have a situation where two council persons and the mayor ask for the meeting, and then at the meeting, you only have those same people show up, and you can't conduct the business of the city.
You won't have a meeting, because you cannot open a meeting with less than 3 council members.
Exactly.
But they will
you
still
call
have
the
showed
meeting.
up.
Well, they'll
You've
show up,
advertised.
but they can't have a meeting.
Well, isn't that the point, though? That's a pointless meeting then.
I got no problem either way with that.
So that tells me that you'd like to make 2.21B and 2.23 on the quorum to be identical. I mean, whichever way you go, they ought to be the same.
I think so.
I think so as well.
Can I ask for clarification, because I can't hear quite as well? Is Jeff or someone else saying that if you have 3 council members that basically come in and sign that form and saying we need to have a meeting, is there a dispute as to whether that meeting should be planned if we have 3 signatures?
I'm saying that the 3 people that ask for the meeting need to be voting members for purposes of having the meeting.
Now, what she's
I
pointing
see.
out is you
I
can't
see.
have the meeting without a signature pad, and if 3 people don't, 3 of us don't sign it up, can you have a meeting? Can you even call a meeting?
3 voting members.
And what David is saying, that there's no reason to have 3 voting members without the quorum, and the quorum is 4. Is that correct, David?
As it's written right now, yes, that's correct. Well, a quorum is the mayor and 3 council members, or the mayor pro tem and 3 council members, which is 4 council members. You could have a meeting with just 3 council members if the mayor is present.
Yeah.
You would if the mayor's not present, you'd have to have 4 council members.
Why would you need 4? Because only 3 required to be a quorum. If the mayor pro tem is a voting member, why would you need other than 2 more? That's 3 of the council members. That produces a quorum.
If that's how you want it to be, then we can make it be that way. That's not how it reads in this language.
I think that what the implication to me now, the way it's written, is that the mayor is qualitatively different.
Yes.
So to require either the mayor plus 3, if that's the way you want to do it, if the mayor plus 3 is the requirement for a quorum and he's not available, then to make it the pro tem plus 2 says that the pro tem is qualitatively better than the mayor.
Why can't we just say if you have 3 council members want to have a meeting, because that's relatively what it comes down to. You got to have 3 voting council members to have a meeting.
I don't know
Whether
that
the mayor calls it or not, you still got to have 3 members of the council to agree to it.
I don't know that the people of this city would want 3 people determining. There would be two wards that were not represented. That's almost 6,000 people.
We've done it a lot in the past. I sat in on several of those in the past.
I've sat in on a few myself, but that don't make it right.
That's the majority. The majority makes the decisions anyway.
I don't have a problem with the 3
be able to occur, but it should be discouraged to handle, say, heavy-duty or controversial issues that were not of an emergency nature and should be encouraged to wait until those other people can be there, if possible, to handle those sorts of issues. Because 3 is a quorum.
I think that's what this question's about.
Yeah, right. I
What
don't think we've
constitutes
determined
quorum?
the questions.
The philosophy, I think, may be that if you have a meeting with 3 council persons, and that's all that's present, and you have a 2-to-1 vote, then you have approved action for the city with, 40% of the people being represented in the meeting.
So you're talking about a meeting with just 3 council members?
Correct.
Oh, no, I think either the mayor ought to be there unless the mayor, something's wrong with the mayor and the pro tem is basically having to act as the mayor. Then you could do it with the mayor pro tem and 2 council members.
If the mayor's not here and the pro tem runs the meeting, does he vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Who
Pro tem receives
makes
their
that
vote.
decision?
It's in here.
But,
It's in the chart.
so that needs to be consistent with this also, to me.
Right. The mayor pro tem, when he or she is presiding, they do not have veto power, but they don't lose their vote as a representative.
As it's written now.
Yes, it's written now.
Makes sense, because they represent a ward, they should not lose their vote.
Correct.
I don't know. I don't think every city is that way.
It may not
Every
be.
city's a lot of different ways because there's so many that are hybrids between strong mayor, weak mayor, strong
Right.
council, and then there's hybrids and everything in between.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just a matter of what we want.
Right.
It's a matter of what we're going to call a quorum.
And I will say that when we talk about open records, this is a big word. So this isn't a trivial conversation we're having, because quorum under the open records can be defined in your charter. And the way you're discussing it here is not how I've understood it since I got on this council. We try very hard, and I can't recall that we've ever violated it, to make sure that no 3
That's true.
voting members are together, but that is not a quorum under this
That's right.
definition.
And that may just be us being extra especially careful about it.
Yeah, open meetings is the term I was looking for there, as opposed to open records, but the same type. So it is important that we have a clear definition of what our quorum is going to be.
Okay, can we take one at a time? If we look back at B and say special meetings can be called with 3 council members, can we agree that 3 council people can call a special meeting?
I agree with it.
That's what it says.
If we can say that, then we have to define what we consider to be a quorum.
Correct.
And then at that point in time, we move on.
Correct.
Um,
I assume that you're fine with a quorum being the mayor and 3 council members when the mayor is present.
Correct.
So the question really is just if the mayor is not presiding at a special meeting, what are you going to be comfortable with the quorum being 3 people or 4 people?
And I can see where you can easily have 2 people absent, so, and you only have 3 people at the meeting. And as a matter of fact, we had one of those when Jay was mayor, and I was trying to hold the mayor up to let Leslie get there because she was running late. I should have called a point of order, but he moved on anyway.
Well, if you remember at our last meeting on this charter, I think it was Verland, spoke about a mayor in the past who would be in China. And my guess is you have to consider that too. We won't always have this mayor. So what we're looking at is how this affects, this council going forward. If you have that situation, what you're saying is now the mayor pro tem can't run the meeting if you need 3 in addition to someone to run the meeting.
Right, it would be 4 then.
Well, the mayor pro tem would run it, and He can
Well,
still
then you
vote,
have the
but
same situation you
I think
just
it's a
described
matter
with
of-
those 3 votes.
yeah, y'all
What if
pick
it's
pick
2 to
between
1?
2 and 3 extra members besides the mayor pro tem. It's
Well, it's always been that 3 members vote, decide the issue out of the, however how many shows up. You got 3 members here, then 2 decide the issue, but if you ain't got 4 here, you still got to have a majority, or if it's tied, the mayor gets to vote, so he breaks the tie. But we've always had, it takes 3 under normal circumstances to decide an issue.
okay. So what I'm hearing is that a quorum is going to be any meeting that there are 3 council members present, whether the mayor is there or not. If the mayor is there, then it's 3 council members. If the mayor's not there, 3 council members is the quorum.
Well, and to Verlin's point, the first part of that, where it says at least 2 members of the council, am I hearing that y'all want to change it to 3?
Do what now?
Well,
No,
and the
that's
mayor,
on the call of the
That's
election.
what I'm saying, but have we decided that? I mean, I don't,
Yeah, I think any 3 of the 6 of you
okay.
should be able to call a meeting, because that does include you.
that's true, but let's not forget, 5 minutes ago, we talked about
Right.
those 3 are the only 3 that show up. There's no meeting.
Correct.
Is that bad?
On the call sheet of paper, does the mayor have a signature on that as far as calling the meeting? So it's always the
Just a
5
blank
council
line.
members?
You need to ask Elisa that.
There's several blanks.
It's just a blank line.
The form
I mean-
that they sign for special call meeting doesn't differentiate the mayor's signature from the other 5, right?
Mm.
3 signatures out of the 6 of us.
So ladies and gentlemen, what is your desire?
I think, David, you may want to just try to figure out a way to mesh those 2 things together and
Okay.
come back to us with that. Because it's going to take you sitting down and really thinking through the consequences of each. Do you want to be able to call a meeting without a guarantee of the number of people who will show up and be able to operate the meeting? That's the way it is now. And do we want to have 3 council members constitute the quorum, whether or not the mayor is present? That's the question. That's how we've been operating, but that's not what this says.
But that is how we've been operating, because we had meetings with just 3 council members.
Well, the call of the meeting, which has to be at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting, I mean, a lot of times Elisa will be scrambling around trying to get people to come in and sign the sheet, and
Right.
somebody may be out of town and can't come sign the sheet, but, we'll say, well, I'll be back for the meeting itself. So I
You have
think
3 members sign for the special called meeting, and those 3 members show up, and there's not a mayor or a mayor pro tem. How does that meeting operate?
if you have a meeting without the mayor or the mayor pro tem, I think that you can still, if you have a quorum, the quorum can elect a presiding officer over the
That's the
meeting.
case, then that 2.23's got to be cleaned up. Because right now, you need a mayor and or a mayor pro tem.
But you always need 3 council
A-
members.
And I would
Right.
probably argue that I'm not supposed to be arguing, but if neither one of those 2 people are present, then, unless it's just really an emergency, I don't see why you need to be having a meeting anyway.
I guess in my mind, I was thinking that situation would be an emergency, or it would be total chaos in the city.
Yep.
There would be, a lot of anger, or either there's an emergency, and legitimately only 3 people can get it done.
Right.
I just want to make sure that we clean it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I would hope you would continue to keep in mind the perspective of us being able to do business. Because since there's only 6 of you, somebody gets sick, somebody goes out of office, somebody goes out of the country or something, and we only meet once a month, there's another way of looking at this, and that is to make sure that we can always meet and approve contracts and whatever we need to do just to keep the place running.
Well, and the next question, well, I don't want to jump ahead, but then at that point in time, somebody will declare an emergency, whomever that would be, whether it be the mayor or city manager. Then you could convene and do whatever you wanted to do as far as an emergency, whatever. Otherwise, you're going to wait till the next council meeting.
Yeah, I don't want to be put in that situation, though.
That's right. I'm saying if you...
I understand where you're coming from, because you don't want the citizens to be underrepresented in a decision, but the other side is I don't want us to be able to make decisions, right? I mean, you got to find a balance between all 5 council people being here versus the other, unusual situation where there's not enough of you to have a quorum and we can't vote.
And I think under the declaration of an emergency, there may be some different rules and regulations, are they?
Well, I took out the whole section about emergency ordinances because in this day and time, it really doesn't make any sense. You can call a meeting on 24 hours notice anyway. I mean, back when people worried about emergencies, you couldn't have meetings as quick as we have them now.
And I personally think 3 should be the quorum. You can always call in and join the meeting as a 4th. We have that capability. And if 2 people are gone and only 3 can meet, like Tom says, that's going to hurt city business if they can't settle up some issues that need to be settled.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Danny. I think I'm going to change it to just say that 3 council persons can be a quorum.
Yeah, that's the way it's always been. It seems to have worked out so far.
Okay.
And do you still agree that 3 people can call a meeting?
I got no
Yes.
problem with that because
Okay. Just make-
you can get somebody to call in and make it the 3rd voting member.
And with the mayor being one of those 3
Tell me
people.
when I can.
You already have.
Go.
Okay. It seems like the mayor or mayor pro tem needs to be there if there's going to be a meeting. Okay, so 3 people signing the form calls a meeting. Now we're going to have a meeting. If the mayor is out of the country or really sick or something else, that council person and the mayor pro tem and 2 other council members ought to be able to conduct business, but be discouraged from handling controversial issues that aren't of an emergency. And if they do not abide by that, they're also doing that in open meeting if they look like they're trying to do a lot of things and vote on things because 2 people are gone. So it's still out in the open and they have to answer to the public. It's kind of demanding. Say you got to have the mayor pro tem plus 3 others. That's 4 council people. You could easily have 2 council people not be able to make a meeting.
And then one of those can easily be the mayor pro tem, in which case we would elect a presiding officer. So you can have 3 people, 3 council members here, and mayor pro tem can be absent, and the mayor can be absent. We still need to hold a meeting.
Okay, we've probably beat that horse.
I think we have.
long enough.
Beat this horse pretty
Never
much.
gonna get up.
This scares me to death.
The next one I see is the top of page 10, section 2.27, which is the section that deals with the veto power of the mayor.
Okay, let me make a note. That means we got to re-meet again because we got to vote on this issue we just passed by.
Well,
Let's just
what I envision doing is after we go through this and I sense as best I can what the consensus is, I'm going to try and churn out another draft tomorrow,
And we'll have,
and you'll have to talk about it again on Thursday.
yep, okay. Now, what were you saying? What was the page?
Top of page 10, 2.27.
Yep.
The veto power is one of those issues that I think you need to reach some type of consensus on.
I would like to see the mayor retain the veto power on on ordinances, but not on resolutions and all other council measures.
So, going back to where we were a few minutes ago, if you have 3 people conducting a meeting, 3 voting members, do we still have that veto power? And if we do, what does it matter about all this hoopla about whether they can meet or not?
The mayor's the only one that can veto.
And it happens after the meeting. That's
Right.
the point.
Right. If you had a meeting of 3 council members and they voted on something, then it would have to be presented to the mayor for signature, and he or she would have the right to veto as currently written.
So whatever action they took would also be subject to the 3 days.
Yes.
And then the meeting could have been for nothing.
In which case you'd have to override the veto if it's important.
Well, I hope you don't. Those people aren't out of town. That you were talking about a few minutes ago.
Hoping don't
I believe we're discussing,
The veto can always be overridden.
we're discussing the veto issue, correct?
Yes.
I guess the question is, resolution and written measures, whether or not we leave that in or take it out. Sounds to me like that's the question. You know, it's ordinances, resolutions, and written measures right now in this copy. So how y'all feel about that?
I don't see any problem with the way it is right now. We vote on it, he can veto it. Takes 4 people to override it.
We didn't have it that way before, did we, David? Didn't you write in this resolution and written measures?
Well, because in the past, there's been some question raised as to whether we call something an ordinance or a resolution. And there have been issues where the mayor has vetoed resolutions in the past because they were there wasn't much distinction between a resolution and an ordinance.
The reason there's not a problem with it right now is because we have a mayor that we believe wouldn't be abusive in the area of resolutions and other council members. But you don't know if you're going to get a mayor who wants to be obstinate and wants to veto everything you do, including appoint somebody to a board, or you want to make a resolution that this is National Boy Scout Day or whatever. You could have a mayor that just wanted to abuse his power and veto everything. It's hard to imagine that, I realize. But it still needs to be looked at because we have seen where it happened, where those sorts of things happen in other cities.
And Councilwoman McPherson, I agree with that. I tried to add in some things that would be excluded. You don't need to have the mayor have the power to veto every little thing that comes up. But as an example to the opposite of that, if you have a resolution to enter into a contract to build a sewage treatment plant, that's not necessarily an ordinance. It's a resolution to enter into a contract with a contractor for $15 million. Should the mayor have the right to veto that?
I'm assuming that if we're talking something for $15 million, wouldn't it have to be in the budget, which is an ordinance?
That is true. I mean, the budget is an ordinance, and that is very clear that all budgetary matters are matters of ordinance. But just on resolutions to authorize the signature of contracts, those often come in the form of a resolution rather than an ordinance.
Okay, and so give me an example of one where a resolution with a contract where there would be a concern for it to not be vetoable.
Well, let's assume that it's even approved in the budget that, you know, we've authorized $15 million to build a new sewer plant, but the council votes to hire company X as opposed to company Y to provide that service. should the mayor have the, if the council chooses company X, should the mayor have the right to say, no, we've had horrible experiences with that company and I'm vetoing the authorization to sign the contract with company X?
In my opinion, no. He or she should not have the power to veto that.
My only concern with the way this is written is, I don't have a problem with ordinances and resolutions. It's the council measures. That kind of makes it all inclusive.
Yeah, and that is sort of a throwaway. If you want to take out other council measures, I'd have a hard time defining what that is.
Yeah, because that leaves the door wide open.
It sounds like everything. Council measures just sounds like anything the council might do could be vetoed.
I think ordinances and resolutions, I think him having the power to veto either one of those is fine with me, and just throw away the other thing.
Well, David, you better poll us, because we all got to agree when we give this thing to the legislature, so we got to come down and compromise on something.
Right. Well, I had given you some examples there of matters that I thought were, I don't want to call them trivial, but they are matters that, I'm not sure that it's necessary for the mayor to have veto power on appointments to boards. I mean, what do y'all think about that?
I mean, I agree. I don't mind just leaving it right there at ordinances. Instead of adding a whole new paragraph, taking out boards and all.
Okay.
Why not just leave it where it was? Ordinances.
Ordinances only, no resolutions.
I mean,
Well, I think that the basic policy issue, which y'all got to come to some consensus from my perspective, is whether or not you're going to just leave it at ordinances or add in ordinances and resolutions. Based on the practical experience, I don't know who I told this, but I tried to think back about vetoes, and I'm guessing that we haven't averaged more than 1 to 2 vetoes per year over the last 25 years. So it doesn't come up a lot, but it does come up regularly, more so with regard to the budget than anything else. So y'all give me some direction on whether you want to leave it just ordinances or want it to be ordinances and resolutions.
I would like it to just be ordinances. If we have the number, obviously, I know I have to compromise if I'm the only one or there ends up only being 2 of us or something.
Mr. Best, you're over there thinking real hard. What's your opinion?
We got to have a strong definition of what a resolution is and what an ordinance is.
I think that's in here somewhere.
It should be law. A resolution isn't ever a law, is it, David? It could be a contract like that, but ordinances are by definition a law.
Correct. An ordinance is something that it stays in effect until it is removed or superseded. A resolution is a temporary action. Entering into a contract is temporary. It's for a specific purpose. That's the main difference. An ordinance is something that normally you would think is going to go into our code of ordinances, our book. If you have enter into a contract, you're not putting that into the code of ordinances. But it's still an important official act of the city. You hire, if you have a resolution to enter into a contract with a city manager, that is by resolution, not ordinance.
I would like to hear from our current mayor. Would you think you need the power of veto over a resolution?
I have purposely sat quiet here and listened to this discussion, and I will continue to do so. I don't intend to use the office of mayor as a stick to beat everybody with. I've told y'all that privately. I've said it publicly. So it is entirely up to you. I will not oppose it either way. This is your decision.
Yeah, but I value your opinion.
You just got it.
So you saying the resolution is, might as well say day by day or temporary as it arises, but an ordinance is something that's going to be permanent. That's basically what I'm getting out of the situation. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes, but again, that example that I just used about, be it hereby resolved that we enter into the contract with our new city, with a city manager. That's a temporary action that doesn't get put into the book of ordinances, but it's an important decision, and it's one that will last and have impact upon the city for years and years to come. So I don't want to undersell what a resolution is.
So far, we've operated with just ordinances, veto and ordinances. That's the way we've been operating, right? Have we actually vetoed some resolutions?
We have.
And so I'm going to reflect back a week or so ago. The mayor asked you that question: have we been violating this ordinance, this charter, by having a mayor veto resolutions? And your answer at the time was negative, that we had not. You now feel like there are times when mayors have vetoed resolutions or other council measures?
Here's an example of it. I don't remember how many years ago, but we didn't word our budget ordinance as an ordinance. It was just resolution to approve the budget. And it should have been called an ordinance, but it was a resolution. And we had a veto of a line item in that resolution. That was more just because we misnamed the document was misnamed when it came before the council. Should have been an ordinance. It was called a resolution, but there was a veto of that.
That was just a mistake.
Right. And I can't recall any argument that where there's been friction between a mayor and a council on any other item.
Except around the budget. The whole thing is interesting to me because you sort of have this weird setup where you have representative government here, where you have 5 members divided into 5 wards, but we're setting the system up or allowing it to continue. We have a council manager form of government, but you can have the need to have a super majority of the representatives to do anything. Now, we haven't seen that happen, but that's why I struggle with this whole paragraph or this whole section. But when you said that about we'd never had the issue of veto and resolutions or other council measures, I thought, well, and how can it be a problem? Why is it necessary to go back and put it in or not, to leave it alone? So in my mind, if we're going to keep it with this supermajority and it takes 4 votes to override, which is essentially 80% of the representation, then maybe we should keep it simple and keep it at resolutions.
Resolution or ordinance?
I'm sorry, ordinances.
I don't have a problem leaving it like it is. We just have to make sure we don't make a mistake when we present something. Don't present it as a resolution when it should be an ordinance. I'm not hanging my hat on resolutions.
Councilman Marshman? Please weigh in on the discussion.
Well, like I said, I was just trying to get a clarification is what he was saying, and he did. I don't know. Which one? One is about as important as the other one, right? The ordinance or the
They can be.
resolution could be just as important as the other one. So
I can't hear a thing Shirley's saying. I think her mic is cutting in and out.
I was saying, I was asking a question, would one be about as important as the other? And he said it could be. So
Resolution and ordinance.
the ordinance
I see.
and the resolution, that's what I was asking, was
Thank you.
is one about as important as the other. So if they're both of the same importance, why not leave them in there? Unless there is one that's not of any importance. And I think the way we talking, it must be for the discussion to keep going like it is. It must be one that should be important as the other.
I think the question is whether or not we leave it in just ordinance, and I'm going to say yes. Sounded like another council person said yes. How many votes do you want?
We need 5.
Yeah, I'd like to know that there was a consensus, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, if you don't have a consensus, you don't have one, and it may come down to the day next Tuesday where you don't get a 5-0 vote, and that's the way the system's supposed to work. Yeah, I've heard 3 people say that they're fine with leaving it as only ordinances can be vetoed. Shirley, you weren't as strong on that. Berlin, do you have an opinion one way or the other?
I think, I've said it all along. If we vote on it, the mayor ought to be able to veto it.
That's everything, yeah.
So
Everything.
that's sort of just a 3-2 split on that issue right there. And again, y'all can be thinking about it, and we can talk about it again on Thursday.
Okay.
I'll give some more thought to it also to see if I can better articulate the difference and how it might come into play. Councilman McDougal, I'm glad you did press me, because it is bringing back my memory, is that was a big, huge issue that we had when we passed the budget through a resolution, because the mayor at that time wanted to line item veto a few things, and the city manager at that time, was taking the position, oh no, the mayor can't veto it because it was a resolution rather than an ordinance. And that was the one that really sticks out in my mind as being it was a big issue at the time. It got resolved by showing that city manager that every budget has to be passed through an ordinance, and it was just a misnomer to call it a resolution. So the mayor got to exercise the veto, and all was right with the world. Okay, well, I'll go back and address that.
That's 2 items we got to readdress.
Okay. The next item is it's on page 11, section 3.11. We've already sort of talked about this some, and y'all agreed that we ought to leave the word shall in there. I've suggested changing deal with to not attempt to supervise.
I like that better.
I do too.
So any further, everybody okay with that with
What about
revisions?
instead of the word supervise, direct?
Not attempt to direct, okay.
I'm good with shall.
I'll be okay with shall if we change the other part.
Okay, down at the bottom on section 3.20 on page 11, everybody seemed to be in unanimity of agreement that we would hire city managers with a contract, and that we would remove the language that had been in the former charter that set forth a process of terminating a city manager. On page 13, section 3.32, I did take out the provision that the city attorney had to be an independent contractor, because somebody made a good point that at some point in time you may choose to have an in-house attorney, and this gives you the flexibility to do that if you choose to.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
David, and just maybe you've seen this in action before, if the city attorney ended up being an employee of the city, that means and their job, that would be their whole job would be dependent on the city in comparison to when we hire somebody from a firm. Would that not put them in an awkward position of maybe not trying to please those that hire them?
Yeah.
Because that's now their job, their benefits and everything are tied to the city compared to an independent contractor.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and most cities that I'm familiar with that have in-house attorneys also have an outside attorney along with that. The employee is usually called the city staff attorney, and then they will have somebody outside and who can be truly independent, who can tell you that you're messing up if you're messing up, which is very difficult for an employee to do, whose job is dependent on being in your good graces. But it is a cost-saving measure. You know, if your volume of business rises to the level that you can support a full-time attorney in lieu of having, you know, outside counsel, then that's an economic decision for the city to make. But most cities do have an independent outside counsel, even if they have a staff attorney.
Maybe it doesn't need to be in the charter. I don't have a real strong feeling about whether it's in the charter or not. My only strong feeling is that whoever we have needs to feel like they can not have the pressure of trying to please us to keep their job, like an employee might.
Right.
Well, I think I brought up the question to David when we met last week, and the way it was written, it said that it had to be an independent contractor. It wasn't that I think that's not a good idea that we have an independent contractor, but a lot of cities and most counties bigger than us do have in-staff attorneys that can answer the majority of the questions that are asked. In a situation where the city may be named as a in a lawsuit, then obviously the city would contract with that outside person to defend them, just like our police department uses an outside person to investigate a wrongdoing within the police department. I think that was my issue, not that my biggest issue was that I just didn't want us to lock ourselves in to say that we would always have to have an outside contractor.
Understood. Okay. I'm good probably either way, as long as we're wary.
We had an in-house staff on and off in East Point, and we had a full-time big staff of people in Macon. And if we were to ever go that route, what happens to you can't tell a employee what to do, because the council would not be able to direct the attorney to do anything if he's a staff person, correct?
Right, yeah.
So we might
Good point.
we might have to change the charter if we were to actually do that, because I don't think y'all could tolerate that restriction.
Well, the city of Douglasville has I mean, they're the best example close to here. They have a staff attorney that works directly for the city manager, who handles, you know, most of the reviewing contracts and the paperwork that floats through. But then they have outside counsel who, you know, is supposed to be the person that can be honest with the city and tell them, you know, you either can or cannot do this.
I would hate for the charter to prevent us from, or a future council from making a different decision. So I like the language that allows that internal employee, and that's an excellent point. Maybe that would need to be looked at if that came along, or maybe you could even clarify that, because you are the one, even though it's you, but you are the one person that we can interact with directly.
Right.
And should be able to. I mean, we need to rely on you for that. So maybe even when you take a look at that other language now, we might say that there's an exception to that attempt to direct for the city attorney, whether it be an independent contractor or an in-house employee, but only for that office.
Okay. Okay, the next one would be,
That may be coming back to this one? Or is that settled?
I think so. I think I got some direction there that I'll try and massage that a little bit.
Okay, item 3.
The next one I have is section 5.21 on page 17.
What page?
17, red line copy.
Page 17, section 5.21, and that question is just really whether or not you want to leave the ability of the council to fill a position for 12 months, or whether you want to reduce that to 6.
No, I like this language at 12 months. I think 6 is just, it's almost ridiculous, because what's going to happen is when that situation comes along, it's going to be 7 months, or it's going to be 8 months. It's not likely to be 12 anyway.
Right.
So I think having that larger window makes perfect sense. We wouldn't want it to be much larger than that, but there'd be no need to reduce that, in my view.
And this provision gives the council the right to do it. It doesn't require that they do
That's
it.
right. It says may.
Because I know at one point in time we left a seat open for, I can't remember whose it was, but we left it open for almost a full year.
Matt. Or Mr.
But it could be 12 months. It could be 12 months, it could be 11 months. That'd be a long time to fill in with somebody that we appointed rather than somebody elected to represent the people of that ward.
Well, it wouldn't be any longer than 12 months. It would be,
And it's just an option, right?
it is an option for you, or you can just leave the seat open. I mean, you still do have the right to call for a special election also if you choose to.
Okay, so it still gives us the option to call for a special. Okay.
Okay, I'll withdraw my opposition and stick with 12 then. Is that one settled now?
Okay, the next point starts there at the bottom of page 17, the removal of officers. Going over onto page 18, I didn't make any significant changes to this because I didn't, looking back over my notes, I didn't see that a consensus had arisen. This still provides that you can be removed from office through one of the measures allowed by state law. And really there's 4 methods of doing it. One is that a resident of the city of Villarica can bring a legal action against you in the Superior Court of Carroll or Douglas County, saying that you have violated your oath of office, or you have violated the charter, or you have, been convicted of a felony. Those are all reasons why you could be removed from office, but it would require somebody actually going to court to remove you. I did add in number 2 there, which gives, and this is something for y'all to decide. It would give the right for 4 council members to vote to direct the city to initiate an action against an officer. So it essentially would require a supermajority of the council to ask to initiate a legal action in Superior Court to remove one of you.
And this is, you changed A at the top, so it's only the mayor and council members now.
Yes, I took out that or other appointed officer, so it just relates to the elected officials of the city.
I have a question. Did you say that those options are included in state law, including the one where a citizen could take a council person to court, or the mayor to court, whoever? Is that state? Did you say that was within the state law options?
It is, that section of the Georgia Code provides the reasons why officers can be removed. It does not provide a very clear procedure for doing it. And, I mean, that's the procedure that I'm suggesting, is that you do it by actually filing suit in court to remove somebody. And the reasons for that is there...
I'd like to see us defer to state law on this, and I think any time that we involve ourselves in voting one another off is a real dangerous road.
Absolutely, I agree with that. It brought back the memory to me, however, of a situation, and I'll relate this because, I mean, it's all public record. It went up to the Supreme Court. At one time, one of our mayors vacated their office because, under state law, because they no longer lived in the city through a de-annexation of a part of the part of the city where the mayor lived. The mayor took the position that, you know, I have the right to continue serving as the mayor. The city council disagreed with that and directed me through a majority vote of the council to take action to, you know, remove the mayor from office. That was a situation where, you know, had the council not been authorized to take some sort of an action, we would have just been stuck with the situation of having the mayor of the city not live in the city. And state law clearly says that they vacate their office when that happens, but you still have to do something. I mean, you can say, you know, Mr. Mayor, you no longer live in the city any longer, but as long as the mayor is walking in the door and sitting down in the chair and calling the meeting to order, something has to be done. And that's the reason why I think we need to at least put in an option for the city to take some action if it needs to. I don't think it should be taken lightly. That's why I do believe you really should have a supermajority of people to declare that the city itself is going to sponsor the lawsuit to remove an official. But there will be some circumstances.
Law says they have to vacate it, but you're saying if the city doesn't build in something, they can't be removed, even though state law says they vacate their seat if they're not within the city limits?
Well, people violate laws every day, but until somebody does something to bring them to account, they continue the way they're doing it. He's saying we need a mechanism to bring them to account.
Yeah, I mean,
and we couldn't appeal to the state. See, my whole concern comes down to this. After some of the things I've heard in some cities, and we have had some, and I don't mean real close and local, there's been some very corrupt things done in various cities. And at times there might be one person that's not a part of that that's trying to expose light on corruption. I don't want the corrupt people to be able to vote that person off. They're also elected, to be able to vote off another elected official who isn't a part of the corruption. I realize that isn't our situation right now.
But it would take 4 corrupt people then.
And they would also Leslie, they would, for 4 council members to try and vote to vote to authorize a lawsuit against one council member, they would have to assert the reason why they're doing it. Because you can only be removed for a violation as defined by the state law. But that would be, if 4 council members allege that one council member is violating the charter in some way, that would be a grounds to remove somebody from office.
Okay.
Other questions?
I got no problem with it.
It's the best I can come up with to address the concerns that I have experienced in the past and the ones that I can reasonably anticipate happening. We can all think of situations that could happen that we just can't address.
Right. You can't handle them all. So I got no problem with this section. Page 18.
One point, this is not controversial, I don't think, but several people have asked me whether or not taking out section, or changing section 9.10 about zoning powers is doing away with the Planning and Zoning Board. It is not. The Planning and Zoning Commission is established under our UDO. And I didn't think it needed to be referenced again in the charter itself. I think that's all of the policy issues that I thought y'all needed to consider, unless you've got some other ones.
Did you look at the possibility of adding in to our charter? I don't know if you got a chance to look at the GMA model charter about listing. Am I out of order, or is this a okay time to bring this up about employees at will employees?
No, now's a great time to bring it up.
What's in that?
Basically, it says the charter may designate either that employees are at will or may only be dismissed for cause. Since at-will employees may be dismissed at any time, it is preferable to make all employment at will in the charter and specify any desired procedural protections for employees by policy.
13. Right now, what it says on page 13, down on section 3.40 and 3.41.
Which page?
Page 13.
Okay, I'm backing up.
It does not specifically address the issue of at-will. It simply gives the council well, it says that you shall adopt rules and regulations concerning the method of employee selection and probationary periods, and really all personnel issues. So I haven't included that at-will provision in the charter itself, but it does give you the power to adopt, which you have adopted, personnel rules that say all employees are at-will employees.
We have. It's just in reading that charter that they had recommended that you do it, and they said it gave more flexibility in hiring, and that it took, in hiring and firing, and that it took precedent over the policies.
Okay, I don't have any problem with adding in some statement in one of those sections that reemphasizes the fact that we are, our employees are hired at will.
If it's agreeable to the others.
Any thoughts from anybody else?
It should be. I mean, the downside of that is creating a civil service system so that anytime you're attempting to terminate an employee, you got to go through about 6 months worth of hearings to do it, and we choose not to do that if we don't have to.
I vote go for it, because I think we need to clarify when we need to do that. So I'll say yes. Add the terminology in.
Looks like a consensus to me.
That's 2 items on page 3 now.
Any other questions or comments, suggestions?
David, you were, at our last meeting, you were going to go in and clean up some of the language where it says mayor and council. Because I think in some places it didn't say mayor and council.
Yeah.
Sometimes it said council. Help me on page 11, 3.11, when we talk about council's interference with administration. Who are the city council or its members?
Well, the members would be each of you individually. The city council would be you as a body.
So does that include the mayor?
When you say city council, is that always included?
Yes.
Does it always include the mayor?
The mayor is included as a member of the
number of
council.
times through here, but I was just refreshing myself on a couple of the things you were going to come back to us with. I didn't. So you're saying the city council as a whole may not be able to direct these employees as well. I think that might be a problem if someone is sitting in this meeting and we openly, as a council, direct somebody in here to do something. I think we can do that, and I think that if we leave it in this particular form, some member of the public may decide that we couldn't do that. I think that's worth looking at.
Does that mean in a public meeting, or does that mean like it on their job? That wouldn't have any reference to a meeting, open meeting with.
Yeah.
It says to any officer or employee, either publicly or privately.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, is if in an open meeting somebody moved to direct, you know, the police chief to go do something, and you voted in an open meeting to do that, you are
In violation of our charter.
usurping the authority of the city manager to direct employees.
But I think that power is reserved to us because we collectively supervise him.
The way I've seen it done is the council just tells me to have it done.
And if you don't get
That is true that could happen that way, but sometimes it don't. Very often we might say to a certain department head, this is what we'd like to do. If that's the consensus of the council, that's what we expect you to do. A member of the audience may have a different perception about what just happened.
Maybe we need to be careful then when we're doing that in the meeting and kind of send it through Tom, or even put it in the form of a question. I know sometimes we may not fully have what we want from a department head that explains something well, and we might say, could we get, Sarah, could we get something, this is where you have to be careful, so maybe it needs to be directed toward Tom. Could we get something that explains this a little better to send out to people or whatever?
I totally agree with Leslie. I think instead of directing anybody in the audience, we ought to be directing Tom to get it done.
That's fine, as long as we all understand what the implications of that paragraph are.
Because that happens.
Because when it happens, there's going to be a lot of folks who
That happens more frequently than y'all think it does.
It's a regular.
I see it happening every meeting.
Yeah.
Every meeting.
Well, you know, not theoretically, realistically, the city manager knows what the workload is of all of the employees. He knows what they should be doing, and if you're telling them to go do something, that may be interfering with something that their boss thinks is much more important for them to be doing at the moment.
But to Councilman McDougal's point, I mean, I hear it over and over and over when someone's up here presenting, we say, we would like for you to bring us back this by next month. And, you know, that employee then in turn could say, I just got a directive from the council to do something which is in direct violation to our charter.
Now, practically speaking,
Happens every every
The
meeting.
city, that's right. The city manager may step up and say, I'll
Right.
take care of that. But that doesn't always happen.
We're splitting fine hairs, but just understand, when you have this in writing, that you are creating a situation where if we direct that staff, that department manager to do something, we're in violation of our charter.
In all fairness, our city manager has told us to do that directly.
Oh, but our charter just said.
Right.
And and that is going to be the law, is this charter. And how it gets split in a courtroom will be far different from sitting right here. But
Well, maybe we
maybe-
need to be careful and send it all through Tom, because we may be asking them to even do something that they can't do right then, and we have, Tom's the manager. Maybe we need to train ourselves to ask for it through him.
David, I would just ask that maybe you consider a sentence that would offer the caveat of when the council is in session, that there would be an exception to this rule. We could all deal with it practically while we're sitting here if we need to, but that way no one is under the impression that there's a gotcha moment coming.
Okay. I understand the point you're making.
Does the city manager have an opinion on this? I wouldn't mind hearing it.
I think, I mean, what we went back to in the retreat was that you guys needed to feel comfortable informing the staff about things that you saw or that you felt needed to be done. And at that level, I don't think there's a violation with what the charter is saying.
As long as you're in the loop. I mean, when you're sitting right there
No.
in the meeting, you're in the loop of it.
Even if I'm not in the conversation, if you run into one of the staff and you say, I saw a pothole at blah 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 location, I don't have a problem with that, because that's not directing the staff.
Right, you're informing them. You're just letting them know
Right.
about it.
Now, Councilman McDougal's point earlier was if you do that 4 days in a row, not casually running into them, but calling them up and telling them, then that's effectively directing them, right? So, I mean,
But that's not really the question. The question is when we're in session. That's really the only question.
yeah,
here.
the charter.
All the rest of that,
differentiate.
we understand. It's while we're in session.
And can the council collectively have an authority there that it doesn't have individually?
And what if we are in a situation where we don't have a city manager? I mean, just think about it.
We've been through that a lot.
You're gonna have an interim.
It's happened before.
Your brain turning.
We have been through that a lot, you know.
Yeah, you're gonna have an interim if you don't have a manager.
Well, we might not the very first day.
Yeah,
Might not the
you
first
would.
month.
Many times we have to adapt.
Might have an
We
illusion.
didn't like it last
They
time.
won't get in trouble.
I mean, there'll be situations that come up that this is, that's why we have we've got a Constitution of the United States, but their Supreme Court's deciding 400 cases a year on what it means.
That's right, but you're going to hear, I guarantee you, because I hear it all the time, you're going to hear, well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, take that up to the courtroom. See how that works.
Anything else?
Last call.
Leslie?
I'll try and have you a new draft before Thursday's meeting.
Okay. Thank you all for your input and your suggestions. Seeing no further discussion, we will have our public.
Is that last call for anything?
Yes.
Okay, then my last thing is this. I'd like to propose a 3-term limit that's 12 years, but you can run again if you're off a term, or you can also proceed out of council and run for mayor, and just people say yay or nay, or David get his consensus.
I would vote against term limits because I think the people that are actively concerned about the operation of the city go out and vote, and the rest of the people don't pay any attention to it. They keep the people in there that they want.
Well, we need to discuss that one further, because that's definitely if you were against term limits. I don't think everybody feels that way.
Well, I can go either way on term limits, but what I would say is we've discussed multiple times that if it's not 4 or 5 votes for an item, then we're wasting our time up here. And I've had multiple people tell me separately outside of in session that they are not going to support any term limits.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Leslie? Councilman McPherson, anything else?
Oh, no, sir. Nothing else.
Okay. We will move to the public comments portion of our meeting. Anybody wishing still here to give public comments, please come forward at this time and do so. Sign in, state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Use David's
Yeah,
mic.
use David's mic or let Councilmember Matt Parsons not available.
Okay, John Henneback, 3106 Golfers Way. Again, I appreciate the council taking the time, and particularly David Mecklin, for the effort that he's put in rewriting and rewriting and rewriting elements of this charter. This has been going on for a long, long time, well over a year, and so I'm glad that you have finally bitten the bullet and we have something specific. I don't, as a member of the public, agree with everything that you're talking about, but you've discussed it, and that's all I think that we can ask. It's your vote. I disagree with the term limits, but nobody else has them. I'd much rather see term limits at the federal level than I would the local, but nonetheless, you've discussed it, and I thank you for that. I do have an opinion on this item about resolutions and ordinances. I think you better be very careful with this. There are, it seems to me, items that come up that are really resolutions. And I think there are some, in general, when you throw, everything in, that the mayor should not have veto power. But there are some things that are resolutions that I think mayor ought to have veto power on. Just be very careful in how you define this. David made an attempt to define the difference between resolutions and ordinances. Maybe that needs more clarification, I don't know. But be careful with that item. The other thing I would bring to your attention has nothing to do with the charter, is our unified code of ordinances is in terrible shape. I don't know how you go about correcting that. I spoke with Bobby Elliott a little bit about it the other day. Man, it is in bad shape. Now, planning and zoning, immediately after this meeting is over, we're going to undertake some discussions about some of the city's technical items and criteria that need to be done that haven't been looked at since 2004, and those have to be approved by P&Z before they come to you. But over and above that, Unified UDC needs to be sorely looked at. So what and how you go about doing that, I don't know, but that needs to be done. Thank you for your consideration on the charter. I think we're going to be a much better off city as a result of this. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? Ma'am, would you like to come forward?
I do.
Let the record reflect, that was my wife.
You'll hear what she's got to say no matter what.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? If not, all in favor? We are adjourned.
Thanks. We'll see you next
Thank you,
time.
Tom. Okay, bye.